We lived in what John Alexander calls the subject story. I don't know if you've read John Alexander's book called Citizen. A lot of the framework from that book I'm using in this sermon, although I disagree with him on a few things, but I think that he's laid this out really well for us. Human civilization was structured hierarchically, with most people being ruled by one or a small group of other people. And for most of history, the people believed that was by divine order or other kind of providence. The elite were simply better than the masses. They were smarter, they were just more worthy. They had more because they deserved more. The people accepted their place in the order of things and understood themselves to be there to serve. You may remember at some point I told the story, the creation story is a Chinese story where the gods take clay and they fashion people really intricately and beautifully, each one unique, and then got tired and took a rope and stuck it into the clay and just whoof, and made all the other people. That idea that some of the people are elite and special and everyone else, we're just the springs of the clay. Everyone is there to serve the elite group. And the trade-off for something like that is that the people, they understand that there's this vast economic disparity, but they were safe. They were taken care of. They had enough to eat, they had a warm place to sleep, they had the freedom to marry within a certain framework, they had children who could be raised without violence, relatively speaking. They accepted their place. And part of the subject story is a tacit acceptance from the people that they are incapable of taking care of themselves, that they need a strong man, an elite group of royals who can manage all the pieces on the chessboard. There needs to be people in charge, a political class or caste, and the people can just trust them to manage the big picture. Kings, Brahmins, emperors, even presidents, people with power, often surrounded by other important wealthy classes, living bigger lives than the average person who agrees to the system so long as they can feed their families and not get hassled too much. The subject story was the human story for most of human history. But then something shifted. Between the 18th and 20th centuries, we have the rise of democracy and commercialism. The consumer story turns the subject story upside down. Instead of the ruler being served by the people take on the role of being served. Beginning with the dawn of democracy, average people started seeing themselves as powerful. In the beginning, there's still a ruling class, right? Presidents are chosen by a small group, an elite group of men, and only a small portion of the population had the vote. And then there was the Electoral College, which was put into place as a protector just in case the people got it wrong. But the idea of democracy, of the people voting for their own leadership, of leadership changing, shifting power from one person to another, from one group to another, was a very new way of considering how to structure human society. And that's the backdrop for the consumer story. With American democracy in particular, the idea that people are not born into power or status, but that they can earn it, took hold. Those concepts were easier here because we didn't really have an established elite. We didn't have a royalty, right? In fact, we had violently overthrown the royalty. The monarchy was gone. And now the people are left to themselves, touting independence, self-rule, self-reliance, most importantly, choice. And those concepts were becoming popular globally, even though they hadn't quite taken hold, even by the 1920s. And that's when advertising and marketing saw its chance. A man by the name of Edward Bernays. Here's a little fun fact. Edward Bernays was actually Sigmund Freud's nephew, which I'm sure is connected here, and one day I'm gonna going to figure this out, but anyway, Edward Bernays is hired by the American Tobacco Company to increase sales. And rather than following traditional routes, Bernays creates a really different kind of campaign. At the time, tobacco was used by men exclusively. Women never smoked in public, and in some cases it was actually illegal for women to smoke in public. At the very least, it was considered crass. Bernays hired a group of fashionable women in New York City, the influencers of their time, to smoke cigarettes during the 1929 Easter parade. He told them it was about claiming their power. Newly able to vote, women's identities were changing, and smoking in public was now being seen as the next step forward. So beautiful women in their Easter bonnets parading down Fifth Avenue were smoking, and they looked modern, self-reliant, chic, sexy, independent. Every woman wanted a cigarette, and consumer culture took root. By the 1940s, consumerism was America's greatest export. Wanting, having, even in places where income levels were low, the desire for bigger, better, faster, stronger, transformed global cultures. We can buy our way into happiness. Commerce became our biggest investment in peace, with multinational treaties and new massive trade organizations supported by the planet's greatest political powers, right? We saw ourselves, if we just bought and sold to each other, we would be partners in peace. There are all kinds of implications for this, but one of them is a new global culture that flipped the subject story upside down. No longer here to serve, the people are the ones being waited on. We have the power of the purse. We get to decide what we want. We are here to be satisfied. The customer is always right. Consumer culture has saturated all of our institutions. I can't help but see it right now in the current election, with each party promising things to the people they want voting for them, right? What can we offer you to buy your vote? Student loan forgiveness, no tax on tips, $20,000 for every person buying their first home, child tax credits. I'm not knocking those programs. In fact, I think that certain things like capping the price of insulin at $35 is a great way to demonstrate how government can work and make our lives better. But I'm using it as an example of the ways that the consumer model is the lens for everything we do. That everyone, no matter who they are or what they want, is trying to sell us something. And we agree to this model because we're buying. We like the power we think it gives us. We like the feeling like what we want drives the conversation, from adding plus sizes to mass markets, to normalizing hybrid cars, to canceling Aunt Jemima. Our money is the sword we use to carve out the world we think we want. But now we're in a moment of turning. And I think you can feel it. I think everyone can feel it. The consumer story isn't working for us anymore. Our consumption has brought our planet to the edge of being able to sustain human life. Our need for more money has us working 80-hour weeks, supported by all the things we bought, like fully stocked home offices. It's easy to feel left behind when your neighbor has a new car and you can't afford one, or people are going on expensive vacations and you're worried about the price of eggs. Personal computing, designed and purchased for our convenience, has created a culture of exhaustion and overexposure. And really, we just can't go on this way. The need for change has inspired a new rise of authoritarianism, the subject model. Maybe we should go back to just letting someone else make all our decisions. I mean, I've heard it in interviews. I've heard people say, we just need someone to be in charge. Someone just needs to take over. We see this shift in Italy, France, Hungary, India, Venezuela, and now here in the United States, where 50% of our nation would prefer what they perceive to be a strong leader who will single-handedly make things right. Understanding the implications of that shift, I'd like to suggest we don't go back. And instead, we go forward. The new model is the citizen story. This is the story I think most of us imagine when we talk about democracy and articulate our fantasies about the founding fathers. Right? This is the story that the Occupy movement tried to embody. It's a story not of the dependence of the subject or the independence of the consumer, but of interdependence. It's not about duty or of rights, but of purpose. We don't obey. We don't demand. We participate. This is the story that allows us all to be part of something new, not led by, not requiring of others, but forming groups of mutuality and connection. It isn't about them in charge. It isn't about me in charge. It's about us together, profoundly connected, working in a woven, interdependent way. I've become attuned to the ways the citizen story could transform our culture, leaning into collectives with shared ownership and models not based on profit, things like free stores. And while I could give examples of how hive thinking could work here in the city or other political systems, I'm really very interested in how it could work in the church. Well, churches historically functioned using the subject model, with ministers and priests in charge. The consumer model is now in full form. Members act like and are treated like consumers, customers. We have something to sell and we hope they'll buy. Sometimes we brand ourselves, sometimes we're not so slick. We ask ourselves at staff meetings, what do people want? Should we offer a Bible study or a group for singles, a brunch for young adults? How do we attract more members? We invest in our future by paying for things like music and religious education. And in plenty of churches, those investments are weighed by the return. Right? I mean, I hear it all the time in churches. I'm going to say I don't hear this here, but I hear this all the time. We hired a membership director and it cost us $100,000, but we only increased our membership by 5%, right? Are we getting back enough for our return? We added hours to our religious education staff, but our youth group hasn't grown. I hear these complaints from religious professionals all over the country in every denomination. Boards want results. And with the decline in religious activity, they're not seeing them. So they're calling their staff poor hires. Right? They're questioning everything. They're firing people. They're shutting things down. They're moving things around, doing a whole lot of blaming because the consumer, the customer, they're not happy. I actually saw, this was true. This was a story when I arrived at my last church. I learned that a member withheld her pledge, thousands of dollars, because the church changed the locks on the front door, and she didn't like it. So she didn't give them any more money. That's the consumer model, if ever I've seen it. I'm not going to say that there's none of that here, but actually I don't see it in that way at all. That's the truth. I definitely don't see it in the numbers. That's not how things play out here. But we are who we are, all of us. And there is a consumerism deep in our bones, all of us. I think it looks different in part here because we don't rely on pledge money in the same way. Members don't threaten to withhold donations if they don't like something. But sometimes there's a little bit of a divide between staff and members, right? Specifically things like staff sitting around asking what should we be offering and hoping that members are gonna buy it and show up. Sometimes people get angry if they don't like the way they're being served. But of all the places I've been, actually, this seems like one of the very best to shift to the citizen story. Because citizen organizations are powered by mission. They value mutuality, interconnectedness, relationship, where everyone has a role to play, everyone is valued. Events aren't put on by one group to serve another, but are imagined and designed by the whole, where everyone has a partner, everyone collaborates, where people support each other. In the citizen story, we care deeply for each other, and people feel seen and are loved. They feel held by the community. They know where to go when they feel frightened or need comfort. They know who their partners are when there's been a grave injustice and they need someone to help them fight. And I see us moving, toying, flirting just a little bit with the citizen story. The precondition of the citizen story is belief in ourselves as creative, capable, caring people, not lazy, self-interested, and competitive like the consumer model assumes. This is an opportunity to step into our shared power, to trust each other, to expand empathy rather than sinking into apathy. It means risking making mistakes, being judged naive, unrealistic. It's in the citizen story that we can commit to a shared vision of the world and to each other as co-creators, letting go of complaining, of ordering, of thinking we're here to be served. Instead, we are here to create, to build, to acknowledge our inherent worth and potential power, always warmer, kinder, smarter together. And I'm telling you, I saw it today in that meeting. And anyone who's been going to congregational meetings for a long time knows that's not how it used to be here. But it's how it was, right? There was an announcement, maybe this is hard to hear, and the response was, thank you. Thank you for leadership. Thank you for making hard decisions. We are in this together. What are we doing next? How are we doing this? As a group, as a team, as a church. How do we move our own mission forward together? That's what I heard today. And I'm telling you, when I arrived here, something like 6 years ago, that's not what I heard. I know that for us to live into the citizen story, we probably do need to have a home, right, of our very own, and we are certainly moving in that direction. But there are other things we can do, right? We can just treat each other with kindness. Reach out to someone you know is in need. Join the Wednesday Worthy Now group. Show up for community events. Ask Jill if she needs help with the kids on Sunday. Or here's something even harder. Reimagine this as a multi-generational congregation. This room is for everyone on Sundays. People with a whole variety of needs, including your own. Some people need space and they sit apart. Some people need community and they sit together. Some people listen best when they're sitting down. Others need to stand up. I've seen people lying on the floor, running down the aisle. Some people make noise. Some people are quiet. Some sing loudly. Some just bob their heads. Consider an embrace of all of it. Next time you want to complain, ask yourself, can you imagine a way to become part of a solution? How do you help? How do you embody our mission? How are you part of the collective? Can you be the engine for what's next? And that mindset will serve us if we can get ourselves there. Because we are this church. We are this planet. We are this city. We are part of the natural rhythms of earth. We are this community, not a consumer of it, but a living, breathing part, interdependent with everyone else. This is our hive. And the time for this change is now. mean, honestly, change is happening, like it or not. There is a turning. We can go backwards or we can go forwards. So let us together become citizens of this church, citizens of this new world, living in a hive of justice making, and always, always putting love at the center of everything.